Welcome to this week's Moonlight of Emuna, Parshas Yisro. This week's learning should be a schus for a full shleim of innocent Feitelman Yehudis, Yehuda Menachem ben Ruchim Pel Makaleya, Shmuel Shezan Bechevechav Menachem Mordechai ben Rafira, Shlam Escham Bas Shifra, and Lila Nishmas, Charnamash Bas Menachem Mendel, Ratza Bas Menachem Mendel, and Henya Bas Yechiel Mechel. So Parshas Yisro is the week of Kabbalas HaTorah. This is what we've been building up to. This is when the Jewish people received the Torah. And it's brought down in many Sfarim in the name of the Chayz of Lublin and others that these parshas, Bai, B'Shalach, Yisroi, Bai is the equivalent of the first days of Pesach, right? Because that's when we left Mitzrayim. The parshas B'Shalach, when the Yam Suf was split, that's compared to the last days of Pesach. And parshas Yisroi is like Shavuos. It's a bechina, as they say, of Shavuos. It's an element of Shavuos, which means what? That on this Shabbos, every single person, right? We talk about this all the time here, that every single word of Torah has to be relevant to every single Jew in every generation, and we know that the Zmanim are ma'ira what's going on in the Parshas. So Parshas Yisro is a time for every single person to be able to be Makabel the Torah, right? That Kabbalas HaTorah is something that's ongoing, it's something that's constant, and every year when we read both on Shavuos and now when we read Parshas Yisro, we're re-inspired to receive the Torah. Everybody on his level where he's holding is to receive the Torah brand new. It's a new start. It's a fresh start of our relationship with Torah, and therefore we have to learn how Kabbalas HaTorah is relevant to each and every single one of us. So the Gemara, we know the famous Gemara, it's brought down. It's always spoke about this week in the Gemara Masechta Shabbos and Daf Peches says, when it says Vayisyatzvu b'sachtis Sahar, when the pasuk says that they stood beneath the mountain. So the Gemara says, Amar of Avdimi bar Chama bar Chasa Malamid Shekofakash Baruch Aleim as Har Kegigas. Hashem held the mountain over the heads of the Jewish people like a barrel. Amar Lehem, he said to them, Matamekabel Matorah, if you accept the Torah, mutav, it'll be good. V'im lav, sham take v'raskim. If not, this will be your place of burial. You have to keep the Torah. It's no longer an option. You have to keep it, and if not, here's where you'll be buried. And all the Mefarshim ask, I don't understand. The Jewish people said Nasav and Nishma. We know most famously the Jewish people screamed out Nasav and Nishma. So if that was the case, and they willingly accepted the Torah, we will do and we will listen. So why does Hashem have to force them? Right? And Tosfos already asked this question. So I saw in the Sefer Tferes L'Moshe, he brings down from the Toldos Yaakov Yosef, in a different Sefer, in his Sefer Ben Paras Yosef, he says, in the name of his Rebbe, the Baal Shem Tov, he says that, you know why Hashem had to force the Jewish people? Because when we said Nasav and Ishmael, we were very inspired. It was an amazing moment. We were inspired. We met Hashem. We screamed out Nasav and Ishmael, right? So a person might think that only when I'm inspired, only when I feel it, you hear this lashon by people who are quote unquote spiritual. When I feel it, then I have to serve. I have to keep the Torah. I have to serve Hashem. But if I'm not in the mood, if the mood doesn't strike me, or if I don't feel inspired, so then maybe I'm free to not keep the Torah. So Hashem is telling us, no, I'm holding the mountain over your heads. You have to keep the Torah whether you feel it or not. Obviously, it's beautiful. It's wonderful when you feel it, when you feel inspired, when you feel connected to Hashem. But even if not, you have to do it. You're forced to do it, right? You don't have the option to say, I'm having an off day and therefore I don't want to learn Torah, I don't want to daven, I don't want to do these things. I have to do it. That's from the Baal Shem Tov. And this Lotcheva Rebbe quoted his Rebbe, who was also a Talmud of Baal Shem Tov, the Mizritcha Magid, and he said that, a person could think, right, I want to learn. I want to learn Torah, but right now I don't feel it. So I'm going to wait until I feel it, where I'm more in the zone, right? I'm more in that space. I'm going to wait. Not that I'm not going to keep the Torah, not that I'm not going to learn Torah, not that I'm not going to daven. I'm going to wait till I'm more inspired, right? Says that what Hashem did by putting the mountain over our heads was that, no, you have to push yourself forward. You have to push yourself ahead to learn Torah, to keep the Torah, right? And you're not allowed to take. There's no days off, right? A person has to know that even when he's not in the mood, he has to do it. It's not optional. And Hashem is telling you, I know you're going to have inspired days and you're going to have less inspired days. I know, because I created you that way. But I'm telling you that you have to turn to Torah and you have to turn to serving me even in those less inspiring days. And I'm going to see in a minute why that's so important. The Bedicheva, the Heilige Bedicheva, Rabbi Yitzchak of Bedicheva, also says something like this, that a person, when he realizes how mitzvahs, Torah mitzvahs are connected to him, he feels inspired to do it. But Kaf Aleim Har Kegigis, Hashem holding the mountain over us, tells us that even when we don't feel that, we have to serve Hashem. We have to serve Hashem the best way we can in every situation that we're in. And he goes on to say that it's even more so, that Hashem has more pleasure and holds it more important from when the times that we don't feel like it, when it's hard for us, when it's a freezing cold winter morning and we force ourselves to get out of bed to go to shul, when we're not in the zone, we have too many things in our minds, and we and we force ourselves to sit down and learn something. Hashem has more pleasure, and he considers that to be more important than when we're in the zone. And he quotes the Sefer Tiferes Uziel from Rabbi Uziel Meislish, also was a Talmud of the Mizritcha Maggid. He said that we know the famous medrash that when Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Shemayim to accept the Torah, the Malachim fought him. The Malachim said, "Why are you giving the Torah to a human being?" And Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu, the lashon is there was to grab onto the Kisei HaKavod, to grab onto the Kisei HaKavod, to grab onto Hashem's throne and answer them. And one of Moshe's answers, where Moshe started asking him different things about whether malachim, is there robbery in Shemayim, that the Torah talks about robbery? Are there parents in Shemayim? The Torah talks about kivud v'aim. So he asked this question: why does Hashem tell him to grab onto the seat? Right? We always understood this story on like a very simplistic level, like to protect him. But does Hashem really have like a physical seat in Shemayim? And also Moshe's answers, Moshe picked on the ones that maybe are not applicable to malachim, but it doesn't really make sense. There's other parts of Torah that would be applicable to malachim. You know, there are also mitzvahs in the Torah that are not applicable to every Jew. The malachim, not every mitzvah has to be applicable to every Jew, right? There are mitzvahs that are specifically for kahanim. There's mitzvahs that are specifically for a king. Not every Jew can keep all of those mitzvahs. So Moshe's argument seems a little bit empty, right? Just the malachim could say, okay, we don't have to deal with gezel, we don't have to deal with stealing, we don't have to deal with kibbud aveim, but there's a lot of other parts of the Torah that we could deal with, right? Just like not every Jew, if a Jew is a Yisrael, he doesn't have the halachas of truma. So why didn't the malachim could have answered that? So what is this Moshe holding on to the Kisei HaKavod, the Hashem's chair, so to speak, and why was Moshe's answer so convincing? So what's the purpose of a chair? Let's think, what's the purpose of a chair? So he explains this in the Tiferes Uziel. He explains that a chair, when a person feels exhausted, when a person feels tired, right? He sits down on a chair. He says Hashem was trying to show Moshe Rabbeinu that he doesn't get, it's sort of like I relax in my recliner. Hashem is saying, I don't get that kind of pleasure from the malachim. I don't get that kind of pleasure. Why? Because they don't have a Yetzer Hara. And therefore, the fact that they serve me, there's no chiddush, there's nothing novel about the fact that they serve me. They don't really have a choice. They serve me because they're programmed to serve me, right? When your computer does what you tell it to do, you don't say, it's such a good computer, right? It does because that's what it's programmed to do, right? But a human being has a Yetzer Hara. Hashem is saying to Moshe, you know where I get pleasure, whatever that means for Hashem, pleasure. But my hana comes from when people who live in this world, who have to contend with the Yetzer Hara, that have to break their taivas, they have to fight with their illicit desires. And why are they doing it? Because of kavod Hashem, because they want to honor Hashem. He says that Hashem says that makes me very happy. That gives me a lot of pleasure. He gives the example that if you have people would go to the carnival and they would see a talking bird. That was a big chiddush. There's something unique about that because birds don't usually talk. If you tried to make a carnival booth where you showed a talking human being, nobody would come see that. Nobody would pay $1 to see that, right? There's no chiddush in it. By the malachim serving Hashem, there's no chiddush in that. Hashem says, you know where the chiddush is? That human beings who I created with the Yetzer Hara, who have all these things on their minds, they have to worry about parnasa, they have to worry about their children, they have to worry about health, they have all this stuff on their mind, and yet they still choose to serve me, even though they sometimes make mistakes and they sometimes sin. But there are times that they choose to serve me. That gives me tremendous pleasure. That gives me tremendous nachas. You know what Hashem's chair is? You know where Hashem, so to speak, relaxes? For when we do mitzvahs, when we learn Torah, when we do something for Hashem's honor, that's Hashem's relaxer. That's Hashem's recliner, right? It gives him that place to say, look at my children. That's why Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, grab onto my seat. He's telling the malachim, you guys can't give me a chair. The Jewish people can give me a chair. Human beings that fight with the Yetzer Haras, they give me a chair. They give me a recliner. Only when I interact with them is it possible for Hashem to have a chair. The Malachim cannot give Hashem a chair. So it's a mashal, but Hashem says, I want a place to relax too. I want a place to enjoy, to have hana. And I can only get that from human beings. Therefore he tells Moshe, grab onto my chair. Show them that you can give me a chair, they can't. And that's why Moshe's responses are to the Malachim. Not that there's not parts of Torah you can't keep, but does it mean anything? You don't have a Yetzer Hara to steal something that's not yours. You don't have a Yetzer Hara not to treat your parents properly. You don't have a Yetzer Hara to do Averas. Only we, those are the examples that Moshe gave the Malachim. Not whether they could technically keep the Torah, but you don't have that fight to keep the Torah. And that's what Hashem is looking for. Somebody who has to fight with that. Somebody who has to fight with that, contend with that, and still keeps the Torah. That's what gives Hashem a kisei hakavod. And that's why the Yismach Moshe adds, that's why Hashem held the mountain over our heads, even though we said Nasa v'nishma. Because when we're in a Nasa v'nishma phase, which is when we're excited, we're inspired, then we're like Malachim. That's not Hashem's primary nachas. Of course, a human being always has a Yetzer Hara, even when he's inspired. So there's always some nachas to Hashem. But the Iker nachas, the main nachas that comes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is when it's a chiddush, when there's some wonder about it. When we're inspired, it's not so wondrous that we keep the Torah, right? But then we're like Malachim. But the time when a person is overcome by his physical desires, by his materialistic needs, and he has to fight with them and to push them away, and then he serves Hashem, when he's in that mode of Hashem is holding the mountain over him, he's not in the zone, he forces himself to keep the Torah because Hashem told him that even when you don't feel like it, you have to keep the Torah, and he does so. That's when Hashem says, wow, you've given me a kisei hakavod. Hashem says, it's beautiful that you said Nasa v'nishma, but I also want your service, and even more so I want your service when it feels like I'm holding a mountain over your head. That's when you serve me as if there's a mountain over your head. That's when it's most amazing. When the Yetzer Hara is attacking you, when it's a cold winter morning and you can't get out of bed to go to shul, and you force yourself to serve me anyway. You're not feeling inspired. You're not feeling connected, and yet you force yourself to do it. Why? Because I asked you to. Because I told you to. Because I forced you to. And you fight that Yetzer Hara. You don't give in. That's the greatest nachas ruach I have. Nasa v'nishma is beautiful, but what I primarily want is kaf aleim har kigigas. And we need to take tremendous chizik and tremendous strength from this, and tremendous derech in our serving Hashem. That even when a person feels like everything is dark, and I'm such a failure, I've tried to do so many things, so many good things, so many times, and I always end up giving into my Yetzer Hara, and I don't feel that sweetness in serving Hashem. I don't feel that sweetness in learning that I see my friend has. And I feel like Hashem doesn't want me, Hashem doesn't care about me, right? My Yetzer Hara is so strong. He overcomes me. He overpowers me all the time. We have to remember not to feel down about ourselves, not to feel dejected, and to feel that our service is not important in Shemayim. We have to know that that's the main service in Shemayim. That even though we feel this way, we push through and we get through, similar to what we said last week. Vayiso, just keep heading ahead. That's the tremendous pleasure that we give to Hashem. This is what Hashem is waiting for. And instead of the mistake that we often make and say, "Oh, I wish I felt more inspired. I wish I felt more connected to Torah, and therefore, and I would be a better servant of Hashem." No, that's not true, right? I want to feel like I'm in a Nasa v'nishma moment. He says that's absolutely incorrect, right? Because in those moments you're like a malach who doesn't have a Yetzer Hara, and Hashem has plenty of malachim. It's when we're in those low moments, in those dark moments, that Hashem says, here's the opportunity. You can make such an upheaval in Shemayim. You can cause a storm in Shemayim. And those moments, those down moments, those dark moments are such an opportunity to give Hashem so much pleasure. And when we fight that fight and we overcome that Yetzer Hara and we overcome those taivas at that moment, we're doing so much in Shemayim. The Malachim are going, how is this possible? We can, with our entire dedication, we can't do anything close to this. Of what that Jew in that dark moment, and the Yetzer Hara was completely overpowering him, and he somehow fought back and overcame. Tremendous. What's going on in Shemayim, we can't even imagine. In that moment, every single one of us, every single Jew has the ability to grab onto the kisei hakavod of Hashem. We're providing the kisei hakavod to Hashem. When we find ourselves in those moments, we have to hear Hashem's voice in our ears saying, "Achois bekisi, grab onto my chair. Show the malachim why I chose the Jewish people. Show the malachim why you're my son, why you're my daughter." And this whole inyan of kaf aleim har kigigas and Nasa v'nishma every year is renewed on Shavuos, and it's also renewed every time we read Parshas Yisro, right? It gives us new strength to each and every one of us as a gift Hashem is giving us. This week we hear the Aseres HaDibros read in Shul. We do the Aseres HaDibros in Shnai Mikra V'Echad Targum. And he quotes at the end the line from the Beis Aaron in Parshas Noach. He says that I'll even read you the line. It's just 2 lines. Ish Yisrael oisa kol masav. When a Jewish person does all of his actions, kedei lases nachas ruach lamakim. A person acts only to give nachas ruach to Hashem, to give Hashem nachas from us, pleasure from us. Afal pisha in a margish shum nachas v'tainik. Even though the person himself, he's dragging himself out of bed on that cold winter morning and there's 2 feet of snow outside, he doesn't feel any pleasure from that himself. He's doing it only because Hashem commanded him to, because that's what his creator wants him to do. As our Hashem will help him, guaranteed. When we force ourselves to do it, Hashem promises He'll give us a point where we get to feel the pleasure and the enjoyment in serving Hashem. We give Hashem that pleasure, Hashem will give us back that pleasure. We should also be zocheh to see, we should have only moments of mostly moments of Nasev and Ishma, but we should have the chizuk to go through those moments of Kafalem Har Kegigas and to recognize the opportunity that we have to do in Shemayim at that moment. And I wish you all a beautiful Shabbos, to be Makabel the Torah, with a new bren, with a new frischkeit, in order to be able to be Makabel the Torah and to serve Hashem in all situations in life. I wish you all a beautiful, wonderful Shabbos.